Why, hello there, you lovely people of the internet. My name is Ollie. Ollionics. Yep, I am no longer also known as Thus You're Mystify, but you've probably noticed that already. Either that or you have no idea what I'm talking about. And before I go on about my life and whatever, I just want to say that the illustration I will be showing in the background of this video is of the character Kakihara from Ichi the Killer, my most recent evil blonde character to be obsessed over. I don't know why that's a thing for me, but seems to be a pattern. Anyway, I am actually going to be selling this as handmade stickers on my Etsy store soon, so please keep an eye out for that if you like it. But yeah, long time no see. I mean, I've still been around. I've been posting on my art Instagram if you're on there, and I've just been, I don't know, I've just been doing things. One of those things that I've been doing, I suppose, is graduating. I graduated from the College for Creative Studies like, has it only been like 2 months? Oof, okay. Yeah, it feels like it's been a lot longer than that, but yeah, I guess it's only been like 2 months since I've graduated. Yeah, so I did that, and let me tell you, it feels really weird to not be in school. I mean, you figure I went through the public school system until I was 17, jumped right into full-time college the fall after, and this is the first time that I felt like I've had real time to myself in years, really. I feel like some non-artists have this idea that going to art school is like frolicking through a field and setting up an easel in the grass to paint the flowers before like sitting around in a circle with your classmates and singing a little song or something. I don't know. But yeah, no, honestly, art school is pretty tough, I would say. I think a lot of us agree that the education system as we think of it is definitely not ideal, but I would say that art college does have some of its own unique issues to it. I will say when it comes to my experience of high school, I didn't feel like it was a ton of work. I usually didn't feel super engaged or interested, but you know, I never really had to bring home much homework by that point. I got into a system where if I did have something that was assigned for homework, I would either finish it in class that day or I would work on it in another class. You know, sometimes I would have to do it like in a different class right beforehand, but I pretty much always got things turned in and I pretty much never had to do them at home. So when I did start going to art school, it was a pretty big change for me. Studio classes, also known as the ones that you actually make stuff in, were structured so that you had 6 hours a week that you were in class, and then usually 1 or 2 projects that you had to do at home. And when I say in class, from what I've heard, most colleges don't really care about if you're there at all. Like, you know, I've heard of stories of, you know, like, oh, I didn't go the entire class, but then I was able to ace the test at the end because I knew everything and I studied the book and so on and so forth. But in my college, they were really strict about attendance. If you were absent 2 times, it could start affecting your grade pretty severely, and tardiness counted towards that as well. So you could pretty easily fail a class if things just didn't happen to go your way. I luckily never actually had any problems with this, despite the fact that I was late to classes pretty often, but I have a few examples of cases where students were put in some really awful situations by teachers because they weren't able to make it to class for one reason or another. But on the other hand, I have many, many examples of teachers being really forgiving on this and cool about being late or taking days off. Most of them really did care about our well-being and didn't see a need for us to come in every class if it would negatively affect our health or make us have some other issue. From what I heard, the reason for that strictness was their funding or something. But anyway, it was a lot of work. So much. There were several pretty unhealthy behaviors that were widely accepted because of the high workload and the amount of time that we had to spend in class, which was primarily sleep deprivation. The fact that I pulled maybe 3 all-nighters throughout all 4 years of me being in that college is surprising in comparison to most people there. You know, it was very, very common for people to pull all-nighters. The teachers would reference it as a joke. It was a whole thing. Being completely exhausted for the sake of a project was a weekly or sometimes even daily occurrence, and talking about how tired you were was a pretty relatable conversation starter and one that I used pretty frequently. So despite the fact that, like I said, the staff were really well aware of the fact that their students were depriving themselves of sleep in order to finish projects, I wouldn't say that they necessarily encouraged it. At least in my experience, this need to prioritize assignments over our own health was mostly self-inflicted. Like I said, most instructors wanted us to be well rested and healthy, so if you sent them an email saying, like, there's no way this is getting done tonight, or I need to take tomorrow's class off to sleep in, they would almost always accommodate you. It was also very common for some projects to be unfinished by most of the class, and there was rarely a project where every single person had something to show. Usually there would be a makeup grade possibility baked into the syllabus, so there would be little or no penalty for doing this either. But I don't think it was really the grade that worried us. I think that our confidence in ourselves as artists was really tied to creating the best thing that we could and working on it as long and hard as possible, like even if it killed us. Maybe not that far, but you know what I mean. There was also a lot of guilt that came from not finishing a project. It felt really bad to put a sketch up in front of everyone for a critique when you're supposed to have a finished painting. And even if they're super forgiving, the amount of times you have to email an instructor apologizing as to why you aren't going to be in class again really weighs on you. There was definitely too much work. That was the main problem of it all. Even if you have one easygoing class, you might have like 4 more assigning 2 whole projects a week. It felt pretty irresponsible to take a group of people that are typically very hard on themselves, give them mountains of work, and then allow the only ways to get relief from that to be something that would hurt their pride and make them feel less accomplished as an artist. The only way to keep being healthy was to fail at completing some projects. To stay ahead of the workload, I was just working and stressing out about getting projects done all of the time. I felt like this momentum would pick up, and once it did, I couldn't stop until the end of the semester. When I did reach a vacation, it's as if I had to slam on the brakes or just straight up crash. For what feels like as long as I can remember, I would be dreaming and planning out all these things that I would get done over break once it got there. I would go outside more, I would start sewing again, or like actually take care of myself and clean up the space that I lived in. And that's one thing that I'm only finally getting around to doing now. But in reality, I usually spent it just trying to rest. I just lost all my motivation to work towards what I cared about, and I basically never completed any of my personal goals. When the lockdown came around, it was really bittersweet. When it comes to school, it actually made things a lot easier for me. It meant more sleep, so much less driving, since I had a 40+ minute drive to campus from my house, and it meant that I was able to realize how much better I work when managing my own projects and doing them in my own space. I was actually taking an anatomy for illustration class when everything shut down, and because of that, I managed to get my only A+ grade in anatomy of all things. A+s were very rarely given out as far as I could tell, and all things considered, I'm still proud of that grade, but I know I would have never gotten it otherwise. Before the lockdown, I was coming into that class at 8:30 a.m. and falling asleep on my drawing horse during the lectures. And if you've ever been made to sit on those benches, you know they are not comfortable. So yeah, there's so much more that I could say about my experience in art school, and I'd like to make another video where I talk about how valuable art school was, because it absolutely was, no question. But since I came into this video wanting to talk about the transition from art student to professional, that being the stage that I'm in right now, I want to get more into talking about the present. I was always told that high school is supposedly set up the way it is so that it prepares you for college, and that middle school is set up the way it is to prepare you for high school. And as misguided as those preparation attempts are, and that's a whole other video as well, I really feel myself questioning, what is the stress created by art college supposed to prepare us for? This cycle that I found myself in starting from high school, where I work constantly, stressing myself out to get that project or essay done, peaking at midterms and finals just to have a break afterwards where my only option is to crash before trying to pick myself back up for the next semester. How does that serve me? And if it doesn't, how do I escape it? Considering that my degree is in illustration with an informal focus on fashion design and fashion illustration, I'm expecting that freelancing and running my small business is the ideal focus for me right now. Most of the instructors in the illustration department, when asked what to do out of college, would suggest focusing efforts into our social media presence, making our portfolios more visible, cold emailing, and simply just creating. When talking to a fashion illustrator that I reached out to, I was told that being available is key. When you have your name out there and you happen to be on that art director's mind when they're organizing their next project, that could be your in that launches you into stable business. But I find myself wondering where in that process of waiting for your opportunity and creating the best work possible you use, adapt, or deconstruct the cycle your mind and body has been trained into. For me, I've found a way, and so far I can't say it's the healthiest. I spend a large portion of my working time right now preparing for and selling my work at craft fairs and pride events. I've done my first one this summer and had experience with a few smaller events last year. I'm realizing that I'm allowing these events to structure my life in the same way as a large project or finals week. Sure, I plan my time based on what works best for me now, and I thoroughly enjoy what I'm doing, but I also have a lot of anxiety leading up to events and energy crashes once they're over. I'm still overworking myself while simultaneously feeling like I'm not doing enough work. I honestly can't imagine how much more difficult this period would be for me if I did not have the support of my family and partner and had to solely provide for myself during this time too, which is something that I try to stay very grateful for. This opportunity to fully commit to this career at this time in my life is a huge privilege. But I have to wonder if I could benefit from it more if some of these ideas were not installed in me. For me to be able to create without being so concerned about my success, to feel like I'm doing enough, to have a more steady stream of motivation and confidence. Either way, I can't change my experiences leading up to this point, and I know that there is still potential for me to create healthier systems and methods to help myself while I'm becoming a professional. I'm actually really curious how many people relate to what I've said here, and I would love to hear about your experiences going through art school and how you've dealt with escaping into the big, scary capitalist nightmare that we live in. Speaking of, actually, I want to have these stickers up on my Etsy store, as well as the prints that I currently have very soon, so please stay tuned for that if you're interested and would like to support me and my brand. And in case you like this and would like to keep hearing from me, first of all, yay, that makes me so happy. And secondly, I feel like that's much more possible now since that can actually be considered part of me working. It gets more eyes on my art and builds my social media presence, right? And Also, it's just like fun and makes me feel good, so that should probably factor in there too. But anyway, yeah, thanks for coming back to my channel and sticking through this. I'll see you around.